Hi, and welcome to today's Beyond Zero Tidbit. I am Catherine, also known as Punch Life Back, and this is the Matrix Guard. So, today's tidbit is all about how our hearts don't have to break and how leaning in and practicing self-empathy keeps our hearts whole. So, life sucks sometimes, and when it gets hard, we are all tempted to cope by numbing. The actions that we take may temporarily comfort us or bring us pleasure, but the relief is fleeting and the pain remains, and the consequences of our numbing can be destructive. So Jennifer Lawden has coined the term shadow comforts, and that's for a term that's used for our numbing behaviors. So these are things that tend to promise comfort, but that don't replenish us. They tempt us with the promise of lasting relief, but only give short-term comfort, and they often leave us feeling worse than we did before. And they're tricky though, right? Because they are offering this false impression of comfort, and they provide just enough of that to make us think that it's real. So Brené Brown, one of my favorite people, right? I talk about her all the time. In her book, Daring Greatly, she says that when we're anxious, disconnected, vulnerable, alone, and feeling helpless, the booze and food and work and endless hours online feel like comfort. But in reality, they're only casting their long shadow over our lives. At their most destructive, our numbing habits, I think, are addictive. And Jennifer Rollins says, and I quote, "Anyone in the throes of an eating disorder, addiction, workaholism, or sex addiction can tell you that constantly trying to run from your emotions is exhausting. When you are focused on numbing your feelings rather than processing them and using healthy coping strategies, you prevent yourself from living a full and meaningful life." Wow. So one reason we may be inhibiting our chances of that full and meaningful life is because of something Brené Brown discovered through her research. And so she writes, "We cannot selectively numb emotions. When we numb the painful ones, we also numb the positive ones. Love and loss." Okay, so this is, sorry, I'm like so enraptured with this. So this is now back to what I say and not Brené. Love and loss, connection and disconnection, happiness and sadness. All of these things are two sides of the same coin. You really cannot have one without the other. And a tricky point here, it's not always easy to identify our shadow comforts because there are actions that can be and often are shadow comforts, but aren't shadow comforts because you use them differently. So Jennifer Lawden explains this by saying, "It's not what you do, it's why you are choosing it and how it makes you feel that defines a shadow comfort. Are we using the action to escape or to engage?" And she goes on to give this helpful example. She says that you can eat pie to run away from yourself, your feelings, your truth, or you can eat pie as a savoring sacrament. Are you using the pie, the shopping, the TV, the gossip, even reading, to hide or to soothe or to celebrate? Are you using the pie to prove you don't deserve downtime, you can't be trusted to take care of yourself? Or are you connecting with the divine buried glory and letting it nourish and inspire you? Brené Brown encourages us to ask, are my choices comforting and nourishing my spirit? Or are they temporary reprieves from vulnerability and difficult emotions, ultimately diminishing my spirit? Are my choices leading to wholeheartedness, or do they leave me feeling empty and searching? There's that word, whole heart. Heart doesn't have to break. So if you don't know whether your action or your habit, your choice is a shadow comfort and you're using it to escape or numb out, try fully embracing it. Now I say this, of course, with a grain of salt. Like if this is a really destructive habit, like a drug addiction, the advice would be very different. But for things like, gossip and eating junk food and surfing the web, right? Like if you're not sure if you're choosing to read a book to escape or not, try embracing it, try doing it, and try to your best of ability to do it without judgment. Because when we are able to get out of the way of our own negative self-talk, we're able to hear our own inner wisdom more clearly, and you'll have more insight into what kind of choice it actually is. So my first question for you today, and if you're a Patreon, you can use the worksheet. If you're a Twitch sub, you can use the worksheet. If not, just write this down and do the work on your own time, because I'm going to keep going pretty fast. So what emotions make you want to escape? Question number 1. What emotions make you want to escape? Me? Sadness. Like deep sadness. Like the more sad I get, the more tempted I am. Fear, for sure. Anger, right? Like the stronger my emotions are, the more tempted I am and more likely I am to numb out. And then the second one is, what are your go-to shadow comforts? What are your go-to shadow comforts? Mine, binging on junk food, for sure. Binging on entertainment, absolutely. And doing way too much internet research. The third question is, why is the promise of your shadow comforts false? Why is the promise of your shadow comforts false? So once you are clear on what your shadow comforts are, you can use your craving for them, your desire to do them, as a red flag that you are feeling vulnerable. And that can be your guide to noticing when you have an opportunity to practice the opposite of running, which is staying. Practicing that courage to choose to face your uncomfortable emotions head on instead of run. So I had a great awareness around this, which is why I called this, this whole thing, this concept about hearts not having to break. In the fall, the vet diagnosed my beloved dog with cancer, and grief just overcame me, and I engaged in relentless pursuit of all of my favorite shadow comforts just to take the edge off of my suffering. But here's the thing. The more I escaped, the more I lost access to the present moment, and the present is all I had left with my dog. I realized I was wasting my time with him, and I could only take care of him the way I wanted to if I showed up to him and met him in the present. So it was ultimately my love for him that motivated me to stop numbing. And that allowed me to finally lean in to the grief. And in doing so, I discovered something that shocked me. Our hearts only break when we numb and fight and deny our painful emotions. When I leaned into my vulnerability, when I stopped dodging and denying and I surrendered to the present, a miraculous thing happened. I was still in acute pain, but my heart handled it. It's like my heart was bleeding profusely, but it didn't shatter. It's like breaking became impossible because surrendering had made me resilient. Why? But why? When death comes and we are in this loss and sadness and this disconnection, I think real comfort happens when we can connect again, even if all we're connecting to is our emotional pain. So in a previous Beyond Zero tidbit, we talked all about sympathy and empathy and how we all want empathy when we're in pain, but we usually get sympathy. And we learned that sympathy drives disconnection, whereas empathy drives connection. And that's connection that helps us to be resilient. So here's the thing. Numbing is like doing self-sympathy. We're acknowledging our pain just enough that we're not being total dicks about it. But then we disconnect and downplay the pain by completely escaping and ignoring the whole situation. Whereas leaning in, surrendering, is self-empathy because it requires us to stay present, feel the pain, and connect with ourselves just like we would do for another human being. So how do we do this? How do we lean in? How do we practice self-empathy? I think the primary step is to really just take the time to acknowledge and release your feelings. This can be easier said than done, I know. And there are many, many ways to do this. So the key is to lean into that vulnerability somehow and surrender to your truth. Ways that I tend to do this is I carve out space time to feel. Like I will schedule it if I have to. I journal. I talk to my coach. I talk to a therapist. I talk to a loved one who is capable of empathy, right? I also have a practice of surrendering to the feeling where I close my eyes. I'll sometimes even outstretch my hands with my arm, like my palms facing up. And then I visualize myself as a channel for my emotion. And this just lets it flow through me and affect me without me like trying to attach myself to it. And I find that really, really helpful. So the next time you are in pain, how will you acknowledge it? How will you lean in? The next time you're in pain, how will you lean in? So secondarily, you can numb less. So instead of choosing shadow comforts, right, you can choose actions that actually provide real comfort, that really replenish you. So some things that do that for me are the power-ups. They're reflecting, just asking myself questions like, am I showing up the way I want to in the world? Am I living in alignment with my core values? I garden. I just sit by my pond and watch my fish. I nap, I sing, I go for a walk, I do this, and I coach. So what actions bring you real comfort? The last bit of the exercise here for the day is to write a couple when-will statements using your shadow comforts and your real comfort list. And they go something like this. When I want to shadow comfort, I will real comfort. Okay? When I want to do my shadow comfort, I will do my real comfort. So for example, when I want to eat junk food, I will journal for 5 minutes instead. When I want to spend the day or afternoon watching TV, I will meditate first. All right. Thank you so much for your time today. Until next time, stay true and never settle. Bye.